Welcome. This is Ed Pozzuoli, president of Tripp Scott, and with me today is Sean Spicer. Sean, as you know, is the former press secretary of Donald Trump and has written a book, Trump 2.0, which I want to show everybody. But Sean, welcome.
It's good to be back.
Well, thanks for joining us again. And I know that, you're on TV every night and, you've done a variety of crazy things, but this book,
Right.
Trump 2.0, reality is far more interesting than anything we could imagine with this administration. Clearly, it's a different tone and a different approach than the first time Donald Trump won and became president in 2016. Do you see differences in the way they're running the administration now?
Absolutely. And that's the whole premise of the book. Part of what I wanted to explain to people is the why. Like, why is it different? Because Trump's only the second president in United States history to have two terms that weren't consecutive.
Right.
But what did he do in those 4 years out of office? And I've had this conversation with the president himself, because sometimes people don't want to talk about, not being in office or not being sequential. But I don't think we'd be where we are if it wasn't for the planning and the plotting that existed in the 4 years that were out. The people, the process, the policies that are happening now are a direct result of what was going on during those 4 years. Trump didn't just go down to Mar-a-Lago and hang out for 4 years and then say, I'm running again. He met with people, he vetted people, he talked about policy, they planned what a potential return would look like. And I think that the fruits of that planning is paying off. Like, our day one, vastly different than the day one of this term. And if you think about it, if he had been sequential, you would have Monday would have become Tuesday, would have become Wednesday,
Right.
The same Secretary of State, the same folks. And the problem with being in any White House, never mind a Trump White House, is that the pace at which you're moving at is so quick that you don't ever have time to reflect. What could we do differently? What could we be doing more effectively? Who do we want to bring in? Who do we want to keep out? And I go through and explain to people that what happened in those 4 years is critical to understanding why Trump 2.0 is different. There were groups that were stood up. There was vetting that was done. There were
Right.
policies. Think about day one. We were talking about travel bans and whether or not certain things have been vetted and were legal versus day one of this administration. They knew
Ready to
exactly
go.
what they were ready to go.
Right.
There was a level of preparation, and it wasn't by action. So when things happen this time, I like to remind people, it doesn't just happen. There was a lot that went into that. The familiarity that he has with the people surrounding him at his cabinet and senior staff level is vastly different than it was when we first took over in Trump 1.0.
And understanding the landscape of Washington.
100%.
In
Well, you think about the
2016,
number-
he walked in, right, and it was brand new to him. Now it's not.
Right. And also there were a lot of people that said, I want to serve. And there was a sense that, oh, well, you've got his interests at heart. You understand the agenda. In many cases, that wasn't the case at all. They were
Right.
literally trying to undermine the agenda. This time, vastly different. These people who are there to implement the agenda, to move it forward. And you don't have any of the same consternation that you did in 1.0. And that's very different. And so understanding how that happened and why it happened, and there's a series of groups that I explain in the
Right.
book that are critical to understanding what the work that they did, what Brooke Rollins and Linda McMahon, Chad Wolf, Larry Kudlow did, never mind Stephen Miller and a guy named Gene Hamilton, America First Legal. What they did to get ready for this term was critical to understanding everything that goes on here. And there's legal cases that were filed to get this administration off on the right foot and to give them the authorities that they needed to do certain things.
It's the difference between 3 months of prep versus 3 years of prep.
But even the 3 months of prep, we didn't know what we didn't know.
Right.
There were people who didn't know what kind of guy this was. I remember Donald Trump looking at me, during the transition and say, Sean, I'm going to be one of the most traditional presidents ever. And I was like, oh, cool, I get tradition. Like, it's just not, like, we didn't know who he was going to be.
Right.
I don't think he understood the office. No offense, but no one does.
Right. Until they're sitting there.
Right. And, the funny part about that is, Ed, is that there were so many times when people said, you can't do this. That's not how this is done. Or the only way to, and we would believe them process-wise. Oh, okay. This time Trump's like, I don't really care. I'm going to do it this way. We're going to get it done. And there was a sense that people were trying to help us do certain things. We've learned that was clearly not true.
Well, I remember going to the White House and visiting with Steve Bannon and had him having the 100 promises up on his whiteboard and kind of crossing them off as they went along. That was as much organization as it appeared going in.
Correct.
As opposed to now, where, I mean, to be blunt, Susie Wiles is an unbelievable organizer and leader. I mean, inside your White House. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Look, but here's the difference, and this is no slight on the 4 chiefs of staff.
Of course not.
But Susie's known Donald Trump now for 11 plus years.
Right.
They have a familiarity that's just wasn't the case. And it's not just Susie. Think about my successor, Caroline Leavitt. She worked in the first Trump administration. She was on the campaign.
Well, think about how connected Donald Trump is with his vice president, J.D. Vance, this time versus maybe last time.
Correct. And the purpose, right? So Mike Pence was brought into the campaign to augment a concern that a lot of Republican voters had about the evangelical side of the agenda. Could he be trusted on certain issues? Because people didn't know him. J.D. Vance is born out of the America First movement. His story is one of the America First policies.
Or, frankly, some of the things that even happened, like with Secretary of State Rubio. I mean, it seems to me that Rubio is totally committed to now the Trump agenda.
100%.
Versus what you had before, kind of a little bit of sideways.
But Ed, let me tell you something that's interesting, because you brought up Rubio. I picked up the phone and called Rex Tillerson, myself and Jason Miller, and said, okay, we helped him get ready for his announcement. He had known Donald Trump, I think, for about an hour before he was selected to be Secretary of State. General Jim Mattis had known Donald Trump for about an hour.
Right.
You think about how long Marco Rubio has known Donald Trump, how long Pete Hegseth has known Marco Rubio, right? These people have years of history.
Right.
That's just so different than from before.
Right. And you can't put a value on that.
Correct.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about Elon and the Doge effort a little bit. Do you think that was, did we stop it too soon, or is it still going?
100%. Now, I will say I'm glad to see J.D. Vance continuing the mantle of fraud piece of it, right? But what Elon did was clunky. There's no question about it. I have a whole chapter on the book on this, because go back and look at previous attempts to rein in government spending. The Grace Commissioner Reagan reinvented government under Clinton. You can't get this done to any degree of success if you don't have the right people. Right. Elon had that gravitas that to be able to go in and tell a cabinet secretary, we're going to look underneath the hood here. We're going to see how this place operates. Very few people could pull that off. So that being said, from a PR standpoint, there was some clunkiness to this. But I can tell you, as someone who's been involved in government for a long time, I had no idea that we have to limit the number of government employees that can retire in any given day, because there's a limestone mine in Pennsylvania that uses a pulley system to take the files down to it. That's insane.
Right.
So if nothing else, one of the things that this Doge effort reminded us is how inefficient so many aspects of government operate at, and that we're asking more and more people to work harder and harder every day to send tax dollars to America. Now, look, I'm fine with that. I love this country. It costs money to live here. We need roads, bridges, a great military. But I don't want you to ask for a penny more than it takes. And when I see the amount of waste and inefficiencies and fraud that's happening in Washington, D.C., I think we should be constantly tilling that garden.
But maybe it should be clunky. In fairness to Elon Musk, maybe it should be clunky. And it shouldn't be easy. And he should have to fight through it.
I think there's a difference.
Some of that,
there's certain programs. Not every program in government should operate like a business. That being said, when we have the technology to operate in the cloud, the idea that we are pushing papers down a pulley system into a limestone mine doesn't sound like, to me, the greatest level of efficiency and effectiveness.
No.
So you go through all of these aspects of government and say, is this really what the American people should be paying for? Because as a reminder, there are people that get up every day and work 2-3 jobs and are good citizens, pay their taxes. They shouldn't be paying a penny more than they have to for a government that's not operating at the most effective way possible.
Let me switch gears. Florida and midterms. So let's just talk generally about congressional control. Do you have a view as to how these midterms are going to roll?
I do. I think most pundits are morons. Most people who call themselves Republican strategists on cable haven't strategized with anybody ever. And then that's unfortunate, because they're trying to tell you how things work. And they say, well, history says this. History doesn't mean anything. You still have to play the game. So if you do an analysis of the 435 seats that exist right now on the House side, there are about 212 that I would say are fairly safe Republican seats. That's 6 short than is needed for a 218 majority. So there's between 16 and 18 pure toss-up seats. That means Republicans need to get 6 of, let's call it 6 of 16 on the conservative side. That's a decent amount. That's a pretty good odds of maintaining the majority. The headwinds are against Republicans, no question about it. The economy's not doing as well as it should be, the war in Iran, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, you still have to look at the math and say, what are the odds? And right now, the Republicans have a pretty decent shot because of redistricting, especially in places like Florida, that have given us a fairly strategic advantage. Not to mention that we're sitting on about $838 million of campaign funds between the RNC and the affiliated super PACs to about 100 and something on the Dem side. They're going to swamp money and resources into key districts. And again, remember that number is between 16 and 25.
Right.
So
that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
Per
Then
race.
you take real quickly at the Senate, we've got a 53-seat majority in the Senate, right? You look at the number of seats that are in play, which is between 7 and 8, depending on whether you call Texas and Iowa competitive or not. That means that Republicans, in order to lose the Senate, would need to basically lose it all. I just don't see that happening. So I think we keep the Senate, and I think we have a decent shot at keeping the House.
And then focusing on Florida a little bit, we have a gubernatorial race coming up.
Right.
Has Florida been effectively the Republican model from a state standpoint?
I think a lot of the policies when it comes to both how to interact with folks, I mean, you look at how they've dealt with healthcare and COVID, then you look at voting and voter integrity issues. Florida has become a model in a lot of ways. I think Byron Donalds will win the primary and be a very effective governor.
Well, I mean, it looks also the numbers have shifted here demographically. Now we have a 1.5 million more Republicans.
Right. Think about this. You go back, I mean, not too long ago, it was Florida was the bellwether state.
Right.
And it's continued to shift to get more and more and more Republican. And Governor DeSantis has done a really good job, I think, of making Florida a model where people want to move here because they're tired of having their rights trampled on. They're tired of paying more and more for social services and projects that go nowhere.
I mean, it wasn't just was just recently when Obama ran against Romney when there was 400,000 more Democrats here. Now there's 1.5 million more Republicans here. It's almost a 2 million voter flip.
It's crazy, right?
I mean,
and
we have some blue state refugees too.
Right. But more and more people are saying, I'd rather move to Florida where I know I can live free, be free, raise my family, pay lower in taxes. It's a great, I mean, it's done very, very well.
Let's talk a little bit about your initiative on Seniors Matter for America.
Yeah.
Why is that so important?
Well, I think politically speaking, seniors vote disproportionately higher, right? So if you're concerned about maintaining the majority, which I am, I'm central to my whole book, Trump 2.0, is reminding people of the movie, Trump 1.0,
right,
where we lost the majority halfway through. And we went from putting policy items on the fast track to impeachment investigation. That's what's going to happen.
Totally
the Dems have made it very clear.
Right.
So when I look at it purely politically,
even more so because of some of the bad ideas they want to talk
correct.
about. Right.
Well, forget just the ideas. We'll just be investigating, impeaching over and over again and throwing a wrench into any of these initiatives that made the country better. So for me, reminding people of the promises made that the president has espoused on the campaign trail, why they're so important to their lives, and then manifesting that into voter action is critical because that's the one voting block that you know we need to do well with. Young voters come and go. A lot of these advantages that we've seen in whether it was black voters or Hispanic voters, we'll see how they play out. But tried and true senior voters are where it's at for the Republican Party.
So as we sit here today, we're at least from Fort Lauderdale, probably a little over 100 miles from Cuba. But as we sit today, the Iran war is still going on, and the conflict. There's been a pause in the fighting. Hopefully, this will resolve it, but we'll see. Where do you see this whole thing with Cuba occurring? Because a lot of folks here are very interested.
Oh, I think this is between here and south is probably the one place in the country that's focused on this. I think it's a very interesting and yet concerning situation. If the Cuban government fails, you're going to have a lot of people flooding into especially the Miami-Dade area, just coming over because of our unique policy that we have with Cuba and immigration, right?
Right.
That poses a very different challenge than any other place that could have a collapsing government. So we do have a very big vested interest in whether or not the Cuban government fails. And if you've seen, especially over the last 7 days, CIA Director Radcliffe coming down, visiting, trying to talk some sense into the Cuban government leadership about accepting aid, trade for some reforms.
Right.
That's what worries me, is that hopefully those reforms go in, because if the government were to collapse and people were to start to flee, I don't know that this area in particular is prepared for the influx of Cuban immigrants.
But isn't it also part of the overall strategy that the Trump 2.0 is doing with respect to Venezuela, pushing China out of Panama?
Yep.
Even Iran, basically,
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that even with Iran, we're doing the right thing. Don't get me wrong. I completely support what the president's doing. If you think about the number of service members that Iran or its proxies have killed in the last 3 years, that averages one every 3 days. So is the president doing the right thing? But then I put my political hat on and say, what do we need to do to make sure we maintain a majority? Because if you're not in power, if you don't have the majority, we're screwed, as I just said. So I do worry that we've got to find that balance. You talk about Venezuela and Iran, now Cuba. And the question is, are the American people saying to some degree, hey, I get it, but what about me? I'm having a hard time filling the tank. I got a hard time affording groceries. There's a balance. And I think the president knows he's got, 2.5+ years. So maybe, unless there's an imminent issue in Cuba, maybe kind of pushing that to the left a little.
Right. Well, Sean, I appreciate you coming again. Welcome again to
that's the
Tripp
key word.
Scott
Thanks for having
again.
me. Yeah, appreciate it.
And we've got a group outside waiting to hear from you, but I want to thank you for your service and thank you for your insights. And we look forward to continue to watch you on television.
I appreciate that.
And reading your book.
Thank you.
Trump 2.0.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.